Good morning and welcome to the Rapid City Planning Commission meeting for September 10th, 2020. If any member of the audience wishes to speak to an item on the Planning Commission agenda today, there are speaker request forms on the table along the left wall. Please fill out the request with the agenda number of the item you wish to speak to and hand it to the staff seated on the left of the dais. At this time, we would also like to ask that if any member of the audience has a cell phone or other electronic device, that you either turn it off or turn the ringer to silent. If you need to take a call, please step out to the hallway so the meeting is not disrupted. Items 1 through 4 have been placed on the consent calendar and may be approved as a group. Action will be taken on all consent items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent calendar by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration at this time. The findings of this planning commission are recommendations to the city council. The city council will make the final decision with the exception of the following item. Item 3, 20PD-020. The Rapid City Planning Commission's actions on this item is final unless any party appeals that decision to the Rapid City Council. All appeals must be submitted in writing to the Department of Community Development by close of business on the 7th full calendar day following action by the Planning Commission. Are there any items 1 through 4 that staff would like removed?
No, thank you.
Any items 1 through 4 that any planning commissioner would like removed? And are there any items 1 through 4 that any audience member would like removed? The chair would then entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 4 in accordance with staff's recommendations. All right. Rachel made the motion to approve the consent calendar items 1 through 4, and Karen seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 5.
Morning. Item number 5 is 20R014. This item was continued from the August 6th Planning Commission meeting due to concerns with noise, privacy, traffic, and playground location. It's a conditional use permit to allow a child care center property located at 4703 South Canyon Road. Again, to give you an aerial of it's a church building, which their applicant's proposing to convert to a child care center. The item was continued, and the applicants held a neighborhood meeting on August 26th, where members of the neighborhood were invited, and they addressed concerns regarding noise, privacy, and traffic. What came out of that meeting, and the applicants here, if there are any questions as well, was that the playground location is in the right place and they're not proposing to change it. What they are going to do is add fencing along the south and west property line for privacy from headlights or vehicles driving on it, as well as noise. So it'll be an additional fence, including the fence around the play area. Provide a noise and visual buffer. So that was added as a stipulation of approval, is providing that fence with a building permit. And then the other piece with traffic was including signage and striping to create the way in, which will be from this west end will be the entrance, and the east end will be the exit, so that we have this stacking area where the drop-off is here. We'll have this stacking area so that they're not stacking out in the street. So we'll want to see that. That's also a stipulation of approval, which has been added to this review. When it comes to traffic, we do have a graphic which Steve Frumer, city traffic engineer, will discuss. But with the revisions and after holding that neighborhood meeting, we are looking at still recommending approval with the revised stipulations. And are there any questions for staff at this time Otherwise, we'd like to bring up Steve Fruman to make a small presentation on the traffic on South Canyon Road.
Any questions for Fletcher before Steve comes up? All right. Mr. Fruman?
Fletcher, is there a way I can zoom this in a little bit just to make sure people can see a little better, or no?
Is there a way to zoom in?
Yeah, zoom in on the,
No.
no, okay. I can, which, oh,
On this one.
okay, and then there, all right. Sorry. During the previous meeting, oh, if I want to draw, excellent. I can work with that. Sorry, during the previous meeting, a number of comments came up regarding what people incorrectly believe to be the case about the speed of traffic on South Canyon Road. So what we have here are speed counts that the city has done with 24-hour radar units or with 24-hour tube counters, automated speed collection in 2016, 2019, and 2020 along portions of South Canyon Road, or at locations on South Canyon Road near the application site. The average speed consistently is in the 35 to 36 mile an hour range. And then we have the different pie charts here where the blue portion in each pie chart is percent of vehicles that were under 30, at or under 36 miles an hour. The pink portion is between 36 and 40 miles an hour. So then, when we have these little whitish portion, 40 to 45. So when people are talking about these vehicles that they believe are going at 45, 50 miles an hour, higher than that, that is under 1% to 1.5% of the traffic, depending on which count we did win. And that's over multiple days, over a 24-hour period. So if someone comes in, comes by at 2 a.m., that's going to show up in that percentage going over 45 miles an hour, and obviously is irrelevant to a daycare center. I believe someone, one of the commission members mentioned, having lived on South Canyon, and there certainly is a perception, that they said, it seemed like traffic was going really fast out there. And that is, a wide-held belief among residents out there, which is why, we keep getting these requests on, can you do something about the speeding? Well, the Department of Public Works, we are not going to do anything about speeding until we've confirmed through radar or, actual measurement that speeding is out there, and it is, to a significant enough degree that we do need to do something with it as far as engineering-wise, rebuilding the road, re-regulating the traffic, that sort of thing. So, basically just wanted to get out there, what the data actually indicates is the speed of traffic out there. And just, the different locations that we do have the counts on. This here, this was 2016 in April, 2019 in January. And then after the last meeting, we put radar units on the utility poles, one uphill from the site, August 12th through 19th, and one right at its eastern entrance area, August 19th through 25th. So even during the rally, we had our downhill average speed was 35 miles an hour, uphill average speed 36 mile an hour, and then even the 95th percentile speeds, which would be 95% of the downhill traffic was at or below 41 miles an hour, 95% of the uphill traffic 43 miles an hour or below. And again, that's 24 hours of the day. If someone flies by at 3 a.m., we'll pick that up, but then it goes towards our data then. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Fruman. Any questions for him on this data? Vince?
I noticed up in the upper left-hand corner, it said a speed limit of 15.
That is a school zone sign, San Marco and South Canyon Road. There, it's 15 miles an hour when flashing. That's designated school zone crossing for Pinedale Elementary School. So,
And
1
approximately
hour.
how far is that from the childcare?
Let's see, the childcare is here. I believe at this scale, that's going to be about 600 or 700 feet. And then I had mentioned the last time, we actually have right now a project under design to put a new crosswalk here, and we are in discussions with the school district as to whether or not that is going to be a designated school crossing or not, speaking with their school.
And the last time I asked about the possible crossing over at, in between those 2 points,
Yes.
is that at all being looked at, or?
We have nothing in the works for that right now. I'm sorry. I did that at the wrong location. It is here at Capitol.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, not at West Chicago. The signal, signalized crosswalk here at the traffic signal would,
Yeah, that makes more sense.
make that one not happen.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Haven?
I had a question, I think, last time on the street parking in front of this property.
Yes.
Did you address that?
The on-street parking there, I don't know that we have any reason right now to take that out. I do know with the, installation of a crosswalk there, we're going to be removing the on-street parking within 25 to 50 feet of that crosswalk to ensure that people going into that crosswalk can have a better view of what traffic is coming within 300 or 400 feet of them, and then same with giving a better visibility to the people who are entering that crosswalk for the oncoming traffic. Right now, I don't believe we have any plans to remove the on-street parking along the rest of South Canyon Road, and it's certainly something that we would, I believe we would not look at that without discussing it with a great many, or at least asking all the residents along that area, the other, church here, what they would think about it. Maybe even, asking the city council about that, 'cause that's a large area, to be removing the parking from if we do that. We wouldn't do it just right in the vicinity of this site. We'd be looking at the whole of South Canyon Road.
Yeah, it's very difficult to hear you, so I think I caught
Sorry,
part of it. But this property is very unique in the sense that there's a slight curve to the right as you're coming into town, and it's downhill. So that makes that street parking right at this location in front of this property a lot different than probably anywhere else on South Canyon Road. And the other obvious question is, why would they need the street parking in front of this property?
If we don't use that space as street parking, we are probably going to have to stripe it as a 4-lane road. That pavement exists. So either we encourage people to park in it or people drive in it. We would not go through the expense of tearing out the pavement to narrow the road to 24 feet or 26 feet. So, as it stands, that parking area, there's the solid white stripe separating the traffic lane from the parking lane. If we don't have that as a parking area, we would have 20-some foot wide lanes, which leads to people, passing on the right, driving wherever in that wide area, essentially treating it as 2 lanes. We would stripe it as more than a 2-lane road. So in that sense, having that area as parking, it tends to be a safer and better use for that than striping this portion of South Canyon more like West Chicago to the east, where the actual amount of pavement that's on the ground, taking away the median, is not that different. So having that on-street parking on South Canyon Road.
Okay, but this property is different. I'm quite familiar with the location, having lived out there for a long, long time. It's a right curve going downhill. There's no chance that somebody's going to be passing on the right in that situation, or double laning in that short stretch. We're only talking about, what, maybe 200 feet. As I brought up last time, that was a significant part or reason for the death of that child. That child darted out right in front of this property on the east entrance between parked cars. The car coming in from going into town, there was no way for that person to see that child come out of there.
Yes,
And it was because of the
I've read
parked
that
cars.
police report.
What's that?
I've read, I have a copy of that police report, yes.
And there was, again, a significant factor was parking on the street in front of this property. And it doesn't seem to me that, I guess my question is, why would that street parking be necessary, especially with the projected use of this property for this short stretch along South Canyon Road?
I don't know that it's necessary. It is there. Certainly could take another look at it. especially if the use is approved, which could, change the need for parking for, this is a daycare center versus, Sundays as a church.
Because, looking at the diagrams here, you don't, it's much clearer when you drive that street. The traffic parking issue right at this point. It's not the whole length of South Canyon Road. It's exactly at this point where the road coming into town curves to the right, going downhill.
Even if you don't mind, can I insert myself with just a little clarifying question here? Steve, it seems like your concern is that if this were not parking, you'd want to see, or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but you see the best option as removing the pavement so it isn't used.
Well,
And I'm guessing what Haven's really looking for or asking is, can it just be striped with signage that says no parking? Is that sort of a fair,
it could be, for, a particular segment. We would do that based on, actually taking the, measuring the distance that someone approaching that curve can see around that curve. Do they have, the required stopping sight distance of, 350, 360 feet. If they do have that visibility, then we would, certainly from the Public Works engineering perspective, there would be no reason to remove that parking. If there were not, then we would look at removing the parking. I would also say that I don't think, the actual use of this building, whether as a church, whether as a daycare center, it may impact what demand or use there is for the on-street parking. It's really not going to figure into our decision about whether or not to have or remove the parking.
even I kind of put myself in, are you good, or do you have something else? Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I could
Yeah,
expand on that just a little bit, and thank you, Steve, that's exactly what I wanted to speak to as well. So, a couple things. They're required to have 28 parking spaces on site. They have 46. So they far exceed what's required. It's not anticipated that anyone using this facility would need to park in the street. It's important to note that throughout all of our residential areas, we require that they be designed with on-street parking. And the reason for that is it's a traffic calming device on residential roads. And I think that's what Steve was alluding to when he's talking about maintaining that speed at around 35 miles an hour. If we continue to allow on-street parking on this road, it slows people down. If you were to open it up like West Chicago Street and you've got 2 lanes, you tend to feel a little safer and you speed up. I just came down 5th Street this morning, and I know it's posted 30 miles an hour, but I sure didn't see anyone going 30 miles an hour. There is no on-street parking, and it's 2 lanes both direction. In addition, it's very important to note that this child care center, like almost every child care center we bring to you, it's not anticipated that children will be walking to this facility, and certainly no one will be walking unattended. Most people using a child care center are going off to work or some other activity that requires that they have a vehicle to then leave and go forward with. They are taking after-school children, but they have vans. They will be going out, picking them up, and bringing the children to the site. So we don't anticipate that crosswalks would be needed for this, or that children from this facility would be crossing Canyon Lake by themselves under any situation.
Thanks, Vicki. Kelly, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's good data, Steve. Appreciate the study. My concern is the volume of traffic, not so much the speed. I mean, 35 miles an hour would be fatal to a toddler in a heartbeat. I've seen it. It's not pretty. My question is there any possibility of any either striping or indicator lights? You know, you go to a school zone to drop off kids, you've got amber lights, you've got signs, usually a deputy sitting by, a police presence, sometimes a radar box indicating your speed. Could that be city funded or even privately funded, just sort of, you know, give people a warning like, hey, this is a delicate area, slow down? Is that a possibility, either pre or post the drop-off point? I mean, you've got 90, I don't know what the number was, it was a lot of drop-offs, and it's all peak hours, rush hour in the morning, rush hour in the evening, and that two-lane road, bottleneck to 2 lanes, I think it's just going to be a tough situation. So just curious as to your thoughts on that.
Let's see, so I guess, were you asking, you know, what the hourly volumes there are?
No,
or-
if
okay,
any kind of signage indicator, you know, dangerous curves up in the hills, sometimes you'll have a radar gun saying your speed is X and amber lights saying caution. Is that
This
something that the city could provide or the owner could
curve
provide?
is not sharp enough, and the road is not steep enough that we would do that. The downhill grade here is under 6%.
Right, but I'm
those-
thinking school zones, you know, you go into a school zone, people
I
doing
don't think
35.
this counts as a school zone.
I understand that, but you have close to 100 kids coming and going at rush hour. Is that even a possibility if the owner wanted to privately fund that, just to slow traffic down?
I'm saying I don't think we would allow that on South Canyon Road.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly. Mike Quasny.
I guess the daycare center can't put up signs that children at play and,
Oh, no, they certainly can on their property.
okay.
We wouldn't allow anything about, you know, regulation of speed on South Canyon Road. You know, we wouldn't allow them to go uphill, you know, 2 houses over to have something, you know, saying slow down ahead, school, you know, or that sort of thing, and we wouldn't allow anything in the right-of-way with a number on it.
But they could have signage that at each corner of their property that say children at play. And I guess I'm a little confused why we couldn't paint in front something to restrict the parking, and it would still do the same effect. I guess there seems like there'd be some kind of a barrier that could be a visual barrier of sorts.
You could require the applicant to do that. As a practical matter, the city is not going to have that high enough on the priority list for our summer repainting season that it would ever get repainted once it wore off. Just being completely honest, marking off, you know, in front of a single property, a no parking lane, or sorry, a parking lane as a no parking area. We can't get through all our crosswalks every summer to get them repainted. So regulation of parking is generally a lower priority than, other things. So being completely honest, even if you did have the applicant, stripe the area as, no parking in this area, once that wore off, all we'd do would be put up a sign at each end saying no parking. If people see it or not, I don't know.
Is there an option for them to, you see these children at play signs that they put out in front of houses and stuff.
Yeah.
Is there an option for them to put something similar to this on their own in front of this space?
As long as it did not resemble an official traffic control sign and was not in the right-of-way, yes.
Okay. Is there anybody here from the childcare?
Yeah, we have a request to speak from.
Okay,
Mike.
so when he comes up, we can ask some things there. Okay, thanks.
Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I fully understand the amount of parking that's available on site. And the last time that we looked at this, and I understand the fact that most of these parents won't be walking their children to this daycare center. But the purpose of, the reason why I was interested in the crosswalk was for the same reason why we don't necessarily want to turn that into a 4-lane road there. It's just another caution. That if a child or a parent decided to, hey, let's take a walk before we go home, they can use the crosswalk, and crosswalks can be emphasized to all of the patrons at the daycare center. So that was my purpose of it. Now, let me make something, if I can make this clear, you didn't mention that crosswalk the first time we spoke, so that's something new that has been added since our last conversation.
No, the first time we spoke, that was just beginning the design phase. We had it out for survey at the
Okay,
time.
and so now it's a fact that there is going to be a crosswalk. So
It is a funded project. We'll be going through design this year, and we're
In other words,
going to be building the ramps.
it's going to
probably
have a
next year.
sign, crosswalk, and it's going to be painted white across that road.
Yes.
Okay, again, another caution. for
Working
folks
out
to
the
slow
details
down.
of the signage for it right now. Like I said, we're, I have, started talking to the school district facilities people about, do they want this designated as a Pinedale Elementary, safe route to school, where it would be the, based on the school starting and ending hours, the 15-mile-an-hour versus, the more just general pedestrian crossing where, we might put, the signs that are always there saying, crosswalk and then, button activated, flashing lights type of thing. Working out those, right now, that has not been determined, but yes, the city's going to be installing handicap ramps on the east side of Capitol Street at, to cross South Canyon Road, and that will, be a painted crosswalk and signed again. As I mentioned, we are not able to repaint every crosswalk every year. How often it gets repainted, that's another thing that would come out of those discussions with the school district. The designated school crossing crosswalks are the only ones that we guarantee that we will repaint every year.
Okay, thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, sorry, I really appreciate you coming to, the meetings, and I really appreciate the data. That's really helpful. I noticed that the colors are different by the category depending on the graphic. And I have read about the increase in fatality. Of course, this is intuitive, but increase in fatality rate in pedestrian vehicle accidents, by speed. And I couldn't remember the numbers, so I just kind of pulled it up. This is based off of, it's the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, so they did a literature review. And I haven't read it in depth. Maybe, maybe there's errors with this study, but I feel like it's a pretty reputable
It is,
organization.
yeah.
But anyway, it shows that between 36 to 45 miles per hour, pedestrian car fatalities is something like, at the lowest end, it's 50%, and the highest end, 77%, with an average of 62.6%. So, anyone going over 35 miles per hour, hitting a pedestrian, more than likely is going to kill that pedestrian at any age. It's actually highest for people who are 65 and older. So when I look at these graphics, I know that it's a small chunk, here and there, but I still have concerns about the overall portion who are going over 35. I don't think it's important for the discussion specifically for this daycare, because I think a daycare is actually safer here than a church was, you know, in some ways, simply because the daycare, there's controlled drop-off and pickup, and church services, whether you have them on Wednesday night or Sunday morning or whenever, you know, I've been to church, kids are often everywhere, you know, people are playing. But I do have a concern, as, you know, just in a public safety perspective, that with such high fatality rates for anything over 35, and we know that this is a residential neighborhood and it should be treated like a residential neighborhood, can you give me kind of any idea of when situations become a concern for police or a public safety issue, knowing kind of those facts?
I don't know when the police, determine that a situation is, of a concern for them. What we're looking at, what I look at is crash rates more than anything else. Over a stretch of road, given the traffic, which, here I'm in order to compare two roads to each other, I'm looking at, how often is there a crash per, basically, per million vehicle miles traveled. Otherwise, in this case, looking at pedestrian crashes, in the past 15 years, there have been two. They were 15 years apart, and one of them, I wouldn't even call a pedestrian crash since they weren't in the road. They were in their yard, and a car ran off the road and hit them. I wouldn't classify that as a pedestrian crash in the same sense of, someone crossing the street getting hit. We certainly have other streets where more pedestrians have been hit more often. We also have busier ones, though, so it's hard to do that comparison without getting all the numbers and then that. I do know in 2012, which I believe was the last time that there was a, at the same time comparison of all these streets, for their crash rates. This was South Canyon Road was below average on the crash frequency for two-lane roads in the Rapid City area. Again, though, that was 8 years ago. I don't think we've done a citywide at the same time comparison of all the roads since. And that was the 2012 arterial safety study.
So just kind of a follow-up question, but maybe just a clarifying question. So my understanding is that in terms of pedestrian safety, which is different than people and vehicle safety, what you look at is actual accidents.
That, and then the other thing, again, with pedestrians, generally looking at people crossing the street. So the big thing is going to be the gaps in traffic. How often are they and how wide are they? It takes a person, anywhere up to 6 to 8 seconds to cross a lane of traffic. So to cross that 12-foot space that we think of as a lane, and that's for a very slow person walking. Well, need 6 seconds to 8 seconds. If that gap is there, for them to get across, I'm going to be less concerned if there's not a history of people actually getting hit, if they have that gap to cross in. When I'm looking at crosswalk augmentation, if you will, with the flashing lights, that sort of thing, it's about creating those gaps more than anything else. Especially on a main road like this, which Yeah.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm going to just jump in here. I know there's a lot of overlap here between considering the street and considering this property, but what we're trying to consider today is the property. So I'll continue to be a little bit lenient on discussions of street safety, but if we're really concerned about South Canyon, that's probably a different conversation than this daycare. Haven?
Excuse me, the staff has recommended that the site plan identifies signage and striping for the approaches. Could you elaborate on that and explain what that would be?
I believe that would be, do not enter signs at the designated exit, and then, arrows on site pointing in at the entrance and, out at the exit.
Yeah, and Fletcher, if you
I
want
guess
to add.
Clarify better, but that's certainly how I interpreted it.
I mean, what they'll do is, with the building permit for the change in use, they'll have to submit a site plan showing what striping they'll put in. So typically that's going to be arrows striped on the drives, showing them which direction to go so that they know that, and then there'll be either assigned entrance here and exit only at that south one, just so that there's multiple things in place to prevent someone from wanting to turn in here. And definitely if it's, it'll be pretty difficult for them to turn in there if everyone else is coming in from this direction and then exiting. And then also with that building permit, they'll identify the fence, the additional fencing along the south and west property lines to provide the additional buffer to the neighbors.
Excuse me. Eric Ottenbacher?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, I guess, more for the applicant. But is there any assurance that they will not use the on-street parking as a drop-off zone when people are running late? How do you plan on maybe enforcing that or handling that?
Mr. Zenz, you willing to come up to answer that one?
So we will have a staff on site that will be a, kind of like a parking liaison initially out there, and then keep that going as drop-off and pickup is done. It'll actually be the upstairs administrative staff to ensure that that does not happen.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kelly?
Thank you. Since Fletcher touched on the fence, I don't know if this is directed to him or the owner. That new fence, that's sort of a fresh element of this whole design. Can I ask what style, what size, was acoustics part of the design of that? I mean, I know there's all kinds of fences out there, and was this sign or this fence specifically designed to buffer noise and sort of address the residents' concerns from last meeting?
After our meeting, we had come to the conclusion that, they wanted, or they had requested something between the facilities so that privacy, things along those lines. It would be a 6-foot wooden privacy fence, is what we would propose.
Existing as a chain link, I believe, from the last photos? So 6-foot wooden is the new design?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vince?
If I could follow up on your rules, do you have anything in writing for the parents when they sign up, as opposed to, here are our rules, this is where the drop-off point and everything is? So all of that is already in writing to your patrons?
Yes, everything will be in writing on our website, and everything will go out in their registration packets.
Right.
Where to park, how to enter the facility, how to exit the facility, and designated spots that are not allowed for parking.
In addition to that, you're also saying here is 46 parking spots if you do want to park.
Yes.
So there's no
Yes.
incentive to try to park on the street.
Yep, and we will ask that for safety reasons, they do not use the street parking.
And that's in writing. Okay. Thank you.
Mike?
Well, we have the business owner and up at the speaker. I guess I'll ask my questions that I was going to ask before. Obviously, in our community, there's a great need for something similar to this, getting kids to and from school. Parents are trying to struggle with all that we have in the systems and trying to still be able to do their job, go to work, and so forth. So I think it's a great need for this. Seems like this is a very viable building in that it's already got the size. And I had a question, I guess, for our fire department to make sure that he has, in fact, the fire safety is in place, and maybe I need to ask that behind me here.
Is that,
Yes, the building will be first. Tim, can you find a microphone? Thank you.
The fire safety provisions are being implemented for this facility as well. It'll be fire sprinkler protected and all of the other provisions appropriate for this type of occupancy. So we're good to go with the layout and the plan as it stands today.
Good exits, good path through the building and so forth. Okay, well, that's a good thing. So the building obviously seems like it's a good option for this, and with the need in the community, if I would challenge you, if the signage, I would maximize the signage out front to diminish that parking, to prevent any problems from that one person that decides that they want to park out there anyhow, because even though you've done all the steps you can take, try to maximize what you can do there for the safety. I'm sure that being in this business, you have the safety of the children high on your list, so, or I would hope so anyhow, and I guess that would be my concern, is to make sure that you do all you can to try to keep that parking free out front. So
we will do that.
Oh, Karen.
I've been listening to all the discussion that's taken place up here, and number one, I agree that this is a location that I think all the neighborhood would need. It's I don't know where the nearest childcare place is, but there's a lot of people that live up here that this would benefit, I think. I also appreciate the fact that you talk to the neighbors, because I think that helps a lot to let them know, and you know what the concerns really are and how to address those. So that's a real plus on your side, I think. I would guess that most people would not use on-street parking for this child care center, because to get to your drop-off is way at the back of the building, and that's a stretch to have kids just run back there. And if I had a small child, I definitely wouldn't. And so I think the fact that you can make sure that the citizens that use this facility are notified that on-street parking is not for them, and that this is the way they're supposed to do it. And I think if you follow up with that, it'll take a while for anybody that goes to a child care center to try to figure out how to get, what time to get there so that it's not so crowded. But you've got 2 lanes coming in, so that helps. There's no backup. I think you've done a good job trying to mitigate all the things that are out there that could cause harm. Any street in town, a child could dart out between cars. I mean, that's unfortunate, but as long as the speed limit is that speed limit, and it seems like they're going that speed limit, you know, pretty much. I mean, 35 to 36 is pretty good in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. I could tell you a lot of places that would go a lot faster than that. And the other, I thought that is, they're going to have a crosswalk a little farther down from this facility. People start noticing that and will say, there's a crosswalk, I got to be a little bit more careful. So I think the traffic, you know, it's not perfect, but I think it's going to be safe, as safe as you can get for any business, that's whether it's a church or anything else. I just think so. I would guess that the on-street parking there would be used more by the neighbors in case they had a party or something and they needed a lot more extra parking. Other than that, I don't know why anybody would want to park in front of this facility. So I'm supportive of what you're going to do, so I just wanted everybody to know that, and I kind of waited to see what everybody had to say, but that's all I had to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you.
We do have another speaker request on this item from Greg Palmer. Mr. Palmer, if you'd like to come up and just identify yourself for a second time at the microphone.
Good morning. Thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Greg Palmer. I live at 4638 South Canyon, which is immediately across the street. One thing I do want to, and I appreciate your comments on the death of that 14-year-old child. The parking in front of the building was not and is not the problem for that situation. Chris was actually hit on the very north, well, not north, I get a little, on the west end of their property. And the parking that was a problem is the parking that is just to the west of that entrance to the church. Where it comes around, you're absolutely right, where it comes around that curve and dips down, right before you hit that curve, right straight across from the entrance onto Belmont Street, that's where that child came out. He came out of that far west approach to the parking lot. And so there were cars parked there, and that's where Chris came out, and that's where Chris was hit. Down farther, where his cross is, nobody ever parks there. Even during, very rarely, when Seventh-day Adventist Church was there in the last few years, that parking isn't used very much. And when church was not in session, nobody parks there except for people coming in from the west. Sometimes they park there to make phone calls to get off the road, but other than that, no parking. I agree with the comments that most parents are smart enough and safe enough with their kids that they're not going to park there. However, it's a very good point, and I don't see really a problem with putting stripes there. What concerns me about the no parking there is that going to eventually migrate over in front of my house? I have no parking if you guys take away, if the city takes away parking, I'm done. I have no parking in front of my house. So that concerns me. The other thing is too is, I'm going to get to my hottest point here. I understand the traffic counts. I understand the traffic speeds, and I understand how those traffic speeds are set. I mean, as far as the average speed, et cetera. They do it by the machine that sits up, or they do it by a cruiser sitting there out in the open. When you come down West Chicago going west, and you hit Malfunction Junction or 44th, whatever that is there, and they angle up, and they start coming up South Canyon where South Canyon starts. The first thing they see is a cruiser sitting there. If the cruiser's not sitting there, and if they have on those rare times when you have that machine, the radar machine sitting there, it's sitting right on the top of the hill. You can see that from a quarter mile away. What is the first thing they do? They slow down. And I know that there was, what I think on the graphic, 4 24-hour periods in which they check the traffic speed. That's 4. My time of checking the traffic speed is like 10,500. I've lived there 30 years. I adamantly disagree with the comments that said speed is just rare. And if I understood the traffic engineer correctly, most of the times it goes over 36 mile an hour is 2 o'clock in the morning, adamantly disagree. I will give you, as was mentioned this morning on Fifth Street on the way down here this morning, now West Chicago, which is a little different, but not much. I'm driving 35. Ladies and gentlemen, I will guarantee you the traffic on West Chicago this morning at 6:45 this morning was in excess of 40 and probably 45, without a doubt. All of them. I was the only one that was going 35. So speed is a problem. I will argue that to the nth degree. And I understand. I have told the gentleman on numerous occasions, I am in support of this project. I do believe that they have done a great job in mitigating problems with children getting loose, if you will. I understand that. They've done a good job with that. Where I am concerned, if you look at the graphic here, this has changed 3 times since I was informed of this project. First, the entrance was going to be on the west side. Then it was going to be on the east side. Now it's back to the west side. The west side logistically and logically makes sense. Where it's a problem is I'm going to try to back out of my driveway, and it's stacked up, and I can't get out of my driveway. There's a threefold problem here. One, first of all, because of the parking that is off the site just to the west, at that curve, as it comes down, and as, again, even if it's 35, and I will argue it's not 35, even if it's 35 mile an hour, somebody's turning in there, and they're not paying attention, or we have another logger coming down, or we have another tandem truck coming down loaded with rock. They're not going to stop in time to keep from clipping that car. They're just not going to. And that's why I was really kind of excited, if you will, that it was going to be on the east side, because at least it gives a little more sight, a little more time to slow down, a little more time to stop. You got 0 time coming around that corner if you're speeding. That's where Chris was killed, at that spot. So that concerns me greatly. I would like to see that changed. I understand the way that it's laid out, why they have gone that way. So the parking really in front of the building has never, ever been a problem in the 30 years I've lived there. Never been a problem. I don't know, like I say, I think parents are smart enough not to let their kids off there, again, because of the traffic speed and the layout of it. So I don't know if that's a big problem, but what concerns me is, okay, you put no parking there, and mom and dad are in a hurry, which would be rare, I understand, I accept that. But I don't want it to ever get to a point to where I don't have parking, where they go, well, there's no parking on the east side, or on the south side, there'll be no parking on the north side. The other thing that worries me is that if this begins to stack up, even if it's for an hour a day, and it becomes a traffic problem, then we'd have 2 solutions to that. One is putting in a turning lane. You put in a turning lane, I lose my parking. The other one is even more horrendous, and that is a 4-lane. I have worried about the 4-lane coming through there in front of my house forever. You put a 4-lane in there, just as it is with Fifth Street. You put a 4-lane in there, and I guarantee you have Rapid City West Expressway. 35 mile an hour, 30 mile an hour, whatever you said, it won't make any difference because they'll go 45, 50. That's what they do on Fifth Street. So a 4-lane would be absolutely disastrous, and I hope the city never, ever considers that. As far as crosswalk, my last comment. Just up the street, as Mr. Vidal mentioned, there is a 15-mile sign, 15 mile an hour sign. There's a crosswalk there. My wife and I use that not every day, but most every day. Nobody stops. Nobody slows down. Nobody even notices. And I don't know so much about, I'm not there when children are crossing because that's just not the time of the day we're there. But crosswalks by themselves, painted crosswalks with a sign, mean nothing to the people of Rapid City. If you question that, go on Rushmore Road and watch the people standing there trying to cross, they take their life in their hands each and every time they use that crosswalk. So crosswalks, I appreciate the intent. As it was mentioned, the city doesn't have the resources to maintain them every year. After a couple, 4 or 5 years, you're not even going to see the lines. So anyway, I have said before this body, I have said before these gentlemen, I am in support of this project. I like this project. Of all the things that could go in there, I find this one to be the most acceptable. But I will tell you, I'm beginning to question my decision on that, because I'm getting the feeling from the city, from this group, from at least some of the group here, that South Canyon is really not the problem. We're looking more at the structure of the building and the type of business and how it fits into the residential area. And I would agree with all of that. But please, ladies and gentlemen, do not discard, do not forget, do not ignore the speed. I will argue to the nth degree that 35 mile an hour is not, clearly not the average speed. I've got over 10,000 days of watching this. I travel this road 8, 9, 10 times a day, and I know what that speed is, and it's not what that machine says. By the time I've sat out in front of my house and I've watched that machine kick on, it'll be blank, and when it kicks on, it goes 35, 36 mile an hour. They have seen that machine blocks before. And as soon as that thing is gone, or as soon as the cruiser leaves, speed goes up 10, 15 mile an hour. Trust me on that. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Palmer. So the staff recommendation on this item is to approve with the stipulations noted. Are there further questions, comments on this item from the commission? I don't have any lights of. Rachel?
And make a motion to approve with staff stipulations.
Okay. Rachel made the motion to approve this item, item number 5, with staff stipulations, and Vince seconded that motion. Are there any comments on the motion? Haven.
Thank you. And this is probably for Vicki, but they've asked for a conditional use permit. What supervision of that, does that permit come back for review to either the planning commission or the city council? And I assume also that, you know, there's a bunch of stipulations that will be looked at in the future to make sure they comply.
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
Very good question, Haven. So anytime we approve a plan development or a conditional use permit with stipulations, and you'll note that in there it says they have to operate per their operational plan, anytime we become aware that they are in violation of that, let's say that a neighbor, such as Mr. Palmer would call us and let us know, or a parent would have concerns, then we do have the tools in the toolbox to notify them that they need to comply, or we do have the ability within our ordinance to bring forward a revocation of the conditional use permit if it's validated. And that would come back to you folks for review.
But otherwise, a conditional use permit itself wouldn't automatically come back for review in the future?
Mr. Chair.
Am I right there?
No, there is no automatic built-in review. We do so many conditional use permits. We wouldn't have the staff nor you folks have the agenda time to review every one that we have in the city limits. Currently, our process of reviewing them upon complaint has appeared to be highly successful, in that if someone is operating in violation and it does create those safety issues, those are the ones we hear about. And we have a code enforcement division and an attorney's office that assist us with pursuing those when those are brought to our attention. It is rare, but there have been instances in the past where we've had to take action and bring forward a revocation, which again goes before you folks for final decision.
Thanks, Vicki. Any other comments, questions on the motion? We'll take a vote then. All those in favor of the motion to approve the conditional use permit, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is 20 UR 19, a conditional use permit to allow an on-sale liquor establishment in conjunction with the Roosevelt Ice Arena, located at 235 Waterloo Street. This is the location of the Roosevelt Park, Swim Center, and Ice Arena. In particular, the applicant is proposing to have a small beer garden which operates during adult and minor league hockey games. Those are specifically on Fridays and Saturdays from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. and on Wednesdays and Sundays from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Those hours may change as schedules change, but as you can see, it's for a very limited time. It's not open during open skate or any other times. It'll specifically be for adult games and minor league hockey games, which is great in this location where we're trying to bring more activity generating uses in the downtown and adjacent to the downtown, and this is a service that they can provide for those going to minor league hockey games. Properties zoned flood hazard district. The on sale is a conditional use. Parks and Greenway for the future land use. And then East Omaha is a principal arterial street. Site plan, again, this is a park, so there's a lot of landscaping existing. And parking plan, the parking's in compliance. This is a graphic showing the interior and the location of the small beer garden, which will be locked up when it's not in use. Photos of the site, the swim center to the south, directly across the street to the north, and then looking north along Waterloo and to the south towards East Omaha. So as with a lot of our on-sale liquor establishment conditional use permits, we're approving it with stipulations in compliance with the applicant's operation plan. And with that, we're recommending approval, and there's a member of park staff if there are any questions.
Thanks, Fletcher. Questions from the commission? I guess I had one, and I don't know if this is Parks or Fletcher. Who would run this? Is this run by park staff, or is it run by the organizations sort of using it?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Doug Lowe. I'm the Recreation Division Manager for the city. Our staff will be running it. Whoever gets hired in this will be over 21, of course, according to our attorney's office, just like our management of the golf courses and beer sales at executive. Everybody that is there will be, of course, of age. So it'll be our staff that's running it. So
That's perfect. That's what I was hoping for. Haven?
Does your staff operate other operations like this, like at the golf course? Is that?
yeah, we have an on-sale beer license at Executive Golf Course that we also manage, and the same person that's managing that is going to be managing this portion of the beer sales at the Ice Arena too. So he's had about 7 or 8 years of experience in managing the alcohol license at the Executive Golf Course. So.
And it's an on-sale liquor.
No, this is just beer and wine.
Oh.
Beer and wine will be the only thing sold there.
Other questions for Mr. Lowe, comments? I'd look for a motion then. All right, Karen made the motion to approve item number 6 with staff stipulations, and Vince seconded that motion. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any discussion items or staff items today?
Just one, Mr. Chair. At your next meeting, we will, at the end of the meeting, we will have new officers elected, and then October, the first meeting in October, the new officers take the positions. So be thinking about it. talk amongst yourselves if you would like, and be prepared to nominate and vote on the 3 positions, which is the chair, the vice chair, and the secretary. And even though the secretary doesn't do minutes, it's there, that position is needed in case the chair and vice chair are both gone, and then that person chairs the meeting.
Secretary also gets to sign many,
That's right.
well, not many.
We keep them busy.
All right, any planning commissioner items? Tim?
Chairman, good morning again. I just want to take a moment here to kind of draw your attention to what's happening across the western U.S. with the fire activity that's going on in California, Oregon, Washington State, as close as Montana, Wyoming, Colorado currently. That activity that's going on out there, you keep hearing items like, it's unprecedented, never seen fire behavior like this before, on and on and on. And actually what they're experiencing, what they're seeing is totally expected. It's based upon a history of no prescribed burning, large fuel accumulations. We've done an excellent job of suppressing fires for 100 years, and so those fuels have built up in that environment. We're building more and more into the wooded areas and things like that. So what they're seeing and what they're experiencing is incredibly tragic and unfortunate, but not unexpected. How I relate that to here in the hills is we have that same issue here in the Black Hills. Fortunately, we haven't had quite the weather conditions that they have had to bring us into those extreme dry, low relative humidity situations that they're experiencing, but we do have that potential here. Now, in the Rapid City Fire Department in City of Rapid City over the last nearly 10 years now, we've taken great effort to help reduce fuels through our wildland fuels mitigation projects. As you've seen on a number of applications that have come through here where we've asked for fuel mitigation plans, we've looked at different types of landscaping requirements, fire sprinkler protection in homes and buildings, and so forth. That was all an effort to try to reduce the impact of the inevitable fire that we will experience here at some point. So I guess one thing that I just really wanted to bring your attention to what's going on out there. It is tragic, but it's not unexpected. And so from a local standpoint, we'll continue our efforts to reduce fuels in and around neighborhoods. Great strides have been made in Carriage Hills, in the most recent projects such as Scotland Hills. It's about 107 acre, I think it is, project that's going on. We're actually treating pre-development, which is pretty unheard of for something that large. But we are making good strides with that. We'll continue to beat the drum regarding building materials, and you'll see my comments come through from time to time that require certain building materials or restrict the type of materials to more fire-resistant type of products. You'll continue to see notes and comments regarding fire sprinkler protection. A couple of the fires that occurred or that are currently ongoing out there started inside of structures and escaped to the exterior. So that's part of our actions. The other part that we don't see a lot of here that's been very controversial over the years is prescribed fire. We've had very little prescribed fire within the city. We do from time to time, but not at the level that we probably should, especially in and around our subdivisions, to help continue to reduce those fuel levels that have accumulated out there and or across the Black Hills overall. We've had some escaped fires from prescribed fires in the hills, which tend to shut those programs down or make them very, very difficult to initiate. And that's something that we as a community and as a society really need to get behind and continue to support more of that so we can actually have good fire on the ground versus trying to deal with a tragedy. So, but I want to say over the last roughly about 10 years now, Lieutenant Tim Weaver, he hasn't been in here for a while to visit with you folks, but he heads up our urban interface program where we have a veteran crew that is continually working every day out there, thinning on various projects around the city. We have the interaction with the developers. We're working with Dream Design on the Scotland Hills is the most recent one. And that one is started a couple of weeks ago, and that'll be a very significant project. We'll bring some show and tell in on that one. If you drive through Carriage Hills or any place along Sheridan Lake Road and out on the western side of the city, you'll see properties that have been thinned. A lot of that was cost share through the state and through the city. So we've made great strides. We have a long ways to go yet, but I just wanted to take a few minutes this morning to bring your attention to it. And also thank you for your support over the years of continuing to help us initiate those proactive measures. So that I'd rather sit before you today talking about good things than how come we have 250 houses on the ground and missing people across the city. So thank you. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Tim. That's a good reminder, and I'll throw my own personal anecdote in. My parents had their property thinned, and I would caution any, true South Dakotans who believe cutting a live tree down is a bad thing. It makes the property look a lot better if it hasn't been thinned in a long time. Having space between trees is not just safer, it's a good thing visually as well. Vince?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Junk the Juniper, that's another program, obviously. Thank you for all you do and for all the firefighters that are serving now and in our city and around the nation. Can you tell me how many of our RCPD, our RC firefighters, our CFD firefighters may be involved in other fires outside of our area?
I think right now, I haven't looked at the numbers in the last couple of days, but I believe there's about 10 that are out currently, or that are in transition, that are on various teams throughout, mostly in Colorado at this point. Colorado, and I believe maybe one in Montana.
Well, I wish them well and safe return.
Thank you.
Kelly?
Thank you. Just a quick question. So how does the process work? Let's say a developer wants to have a housing complex in a wooded area or even like a grassland prairie. Does the city go to the fire department for recommendations, or is it a collaboration between the two, or how does that work as far as, land use and management prior to construction and approving?
Mr. Chair.
Vicki?
So when we get an application in for a plat, and let's take Scotland Hills, it's at the very western terminus of East Minnesota Street. So it's just north of the Walmart on Stumer Road, go down East Minnesota Street. There you have it. It's gorgeous. But when that preliminary subdivision plan came in, it was going to be brought to you folks for a recommendation and taken on to council. Everything gets routed to the fire department. And their comments were that a wildfire fuel mitigation plan needed to be implemented. And so we indicated as a stipulation of approval, which you supported and council took action on, that said prior to submittal of a final plat, they had to have that plan secured with the fire department. It didn't require that the fuels be removed before final plat submittal, but the plan that Tim and his team concurred with had to be in place before they could then create the final plat and sell it off to individual property owners. Because then we lose our voice when we're starting to deal with 70 individual property owners, or in this case 40, versus just one. There's a rare occasion where we have a plan development or a conditional use permit that we would require that. Typically it's when raw land is being developed that we get the best opportunity to require it. And you folks have been very receptive to it over the years.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
If I might add to that a little bit, it is certainly a collaborative effort, and it takes a lot of interaction with the public, with the developers, educational side to get them, make people aware of the issue overall. And like Mr. Braun identified, the ground does actually look better once it's thinned. We go back through some of the comments on a number of our projects, especially up in Carriage Hills, or those other areas that are very, very timbered, a lot of topographic changes, deviations, and people after it's done, it's like, wow, I didn't even know I owned that piece of property down the hill, They can actually see it now. In Scotland Hills, Lieutenant Weaver was just up there yesterday, and it's shaping up just like we intended. You can see the oaks and the other more fire-resistant materials down in the draw bottoms. You can actually see the wildlife. It'll open it up. So it works out very, very well, but it is a lot of effort between planning, the fire department, the public, the developers. It's a group effort, so.
Rachel?
I had a couple of questions. I guess, and this isn't very scientific, but I've heard some talk about California, that the fires were less of an issue when it was actually under Native American control, which is interesting to me because if you look back at historic photos of the Black Hills, before European settlers came here, it's a lot thinner than it is today. So it's kind of fascinating to me just from a historical perspective. But I had a question. You know, my dad lives in a 3-story stick-built home in western side of Rapid City in a canyon, and we've had some, you know, close calls over the last 40 years of, you know, that house being in our family. What is the cost share program? Do they help kind of fund upgrades to materials or prescribed burning, or how does that work?
Yes, there's actually a number of programs. The one that's been the longest standing is a 50-50 cost share. So Lieutenant Weaver of our Fire and Life Safety Division will go out and assess a property and look at what type of fuels need to be mitigated, whether it's junk to juniper type of efforts or fuels removal in general. And then contracts, or our contractor is contacted. The homeowner actually initiates a bid, so to speak, from 2 or 3 contractors. And those bids are reviewed and accepted. And then once the work is completed, about 50%, actually a little more than 50% of that cost is shared currently. If it's building materials, there is currently a grant we're waiting on. We believe we may have been awarded it, but we won't know for another month or so, regarding decking materials and roofing materials. And some of those, we've had a couple of those programs so far where we help people replace roofs, such as cedar shakes and that type of thing. The most current one, I believe that's coming up in a month or so, I'd have to look back, I believe it's decking materials on that particular one. So really just making contact with the fire department to see if they're actually able to get in on that type of effort. And a lot of times on the like decking materials and building materials, that's a pre-disaster mitigation grants, which are oftentimes reserved for flooding and other events around the state. And we've kind of broke that ice a little bit to get into some of those because of our wildland risk that we have out here. So the more of public interest we have in those programs, or the need, that helps us build the basis for some of those grants. But really on a proactive piece, we're trying to get into, we have a best practices for building materials for all new construction, and we're trying to get that utilized more frequently.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, any other items for the commission today? If not, I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Rachel made the motion to adjourn, and Karen seconded that motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.